Hi, I'm Perry Atkinson, General Manager here at theDove. Hey, check out our other videos and check out our website at thedove.us. Welcome back. Well, delighted to have with us a gentleman I've been looking forward to talking to. Mark Beliles is with us. He's the author of a book called Doubting Thomas, the religious life and legacy of Thomas Jefferson. And there's a picture of it there on the screen. You may want to check it out at the bookstores. And he's pretty interesting. He writes a lot and studies a lot and lectures a lot about Jefferson. He's chairman of the Charlottesville Historical Resources Committee. And he lives in the town that Jefferson lived in. So let's talk to him. Hi, Mark. Good to see you, my friend. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you, Perry.
This is fascinating. One of my favorite places to go in Washington, D.C. is the Jefferson Memorial. I just love it there, and I'll spend quite a bit of time in there and contemplating. And I can't tell you how many people will tell me, well, he was a deist, he wasn't a Christian. That's got to be the big question. How do you respond to that one?
Well, it is the prevailing view. There's so many modern biographies of Jefferson that speak of him in that way, probably more than almost any other founding father. They call him a deist or skeptic or anything but a Christian. But in reality, the evidence shows something quite different from it. And it's not an easy, simple answer, but it's clearly he definitely was not a deist who would be someone who didn't really believe in an active personal God. But he was, and he called himself a Christian his whole life and attended church his whole life, Trinitarian, Bible-believing churches.
All right. So where did the rub come? Why would it be the other way? Why would people say he wasn't?
Well, there's a few different reasons. One, there's in almost all of the kind of biographies of Jefferson, people emphasize some of his statements very late in his life. That in the last 13 years of his life, when he's quite more older than in other part of his life, and he was at that point, he said things that questioned the scriptures being, are they really, valid? Are they not just that they weren't originally from God, but he questioned that they were, mutated over the years in the Middle Ages by different people and so he would say things like that, and he would question the doctrine of the Trinity and things like that. But this was almost always what you hear over and over, these kinds of things. And so this kind of puts him into certainly a questionable category, but so that's what people emphasize. The problem is that's only the last 13 years of an 86-year-long life, and there's so much more of his life that supports the Christian faith and the Bible, so that there really needs to be a sense of context whenever people talk about Jefferson.
All right, so who's the Reverend Charles Clay? What part did he play in Jefferson's life?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked about Charles Clay. Since I live here in Charlottesville, Virginia, it's really been an interesting, fun discovery for me, because it was right here in Jefferson's hometown that during the American Revolution, Jefferson became really close friends with the Anglican clergyman, the priest of his parish, and at that point, once we separated from England, then churches could be independent by law, but they couldn't be before. And so Jefferson started a church. Most people have never believed that, but he started a new church in Charlottesville, met in the courthouse, and its pastor was this Reverend Charles Clay. What's unique about him is he was not a typical Anglican preacher. He was a man born out of the Great Awakening. He was a revivalist. I mean, and I studied his sermons, 50 handwritten sermons I found in the Historical Society. They were very much like, a revivalist kind of preaching. And this was who Jefferson said, I want to be the pastor of a new church called the Calvinistical Reformed Church. And it met right in the courthouse during the War for Independence.
Wow. Boy, you never hear that.
Never.
Wow.
It doesn't fit the paradigm that people have of Jefferson. So unfortunately, almost all of these biographers will leave that little fact out because it just doesn't fit their exceptions.
Wow. Where was he on separation of church and state?
Well, clearly, Jefferson is probably most famous because of this letter he wrote in the while he was president, to some Baptists in Connecticut in 1802. He wrote a letter to friends and supporters, political supporters, who really were concerned that he would not try to promote a national church. And like the Church of England has, and the European churches have official connections to the government. And so Jefferson wrote a letter saying, I agree with you. I will not proclaim a national, day of prayer. It was that they didn't want it. These Baptists in New England did not want him to do that. So he said, I agree with you because I believe the Constitution has erected a wall of separation between church and state. So his idea was to keep government basically out of religion, government from becoming any sort of controlling force, whether coercion of people of belief or I think he would be against the modern kind of government role, which is sort of enforcing atheism in almost every period of life. And so that's the real separation of church and state, as Jefferson talked about, was not a secular state, but just a government separated from trying to dictate how it should be. Let the free market decide. Let people decide what they want to do.
Were you to find anything in your research, Mark, that give an indication of what his private beliefs were about Jesus?
Yes, Perry. One of the things that, again, I would say it's very important to recognize there's phases of his life. When you look at his very beginning phase of his life, he made an oath to support the doctrines of the Anglican Church, which confessed Jesus as Savior and Lord and as God and Trinity and resurrection and all those things. But by the very end of his life, in the last 13 years, we see for the very first time him talking about Jesus without believing him as being fully divine in the sense we think of, as being not really part of the Trinity. Yet at the same time, he didn't deny Jesus' resurrection. He didn't deny everything. So it's a strange kind of view, more of a Unitarian kind of view, but not even modern Unitarianism. It was Unitarianism that was unique to that time, which was still believing in Jesus as Savior. He spoke of Jesus as Savior still, but yet he just kind of believed somehow less than fully Trinitarian kind of view that we might think.
Okay. When he was president, where did he attend church?
That's really a fascinating part of his life. When he went to Washington, of course, Washington, D.C. was a very brand new city, so they didn't have many church buildings yet. And so the U.S. Capitol became the central place of worship. And he was a part, first of those services that began to be held in the Capitol building. So here's federal property. That's an idea of he supported religion being expressed, worship services in a federal building. But so he worshiped there regularly, but he also went to other churches in Washington as they began to hold services in different places. He was an official member of the Episcopal Church in Washington. We have letters where he clearly shows he was, and he gave money to it, to his church. It's actually amazing. He gave money to many churches in his life. There's probably 300 clergymen and churches we can document in his writings that most people never heard about, that he supported, was friends with, gave money, attended church services. So in Washington, primarily, though, the Capitol is where you would find him.
Wow. What do your fellow Virginians think of him? Do they consider him a believer?
Probably, again, that's one of the things that is the modern biographers have so, I think, distorted his image, because in Jefferson's own lifetime, there was never a single pastor or religious leader in all of Virginia, especially not in his hometown, but nowhere in Virginia, that questioned his faith and in any way doubted him to be a believer. In fact, for that matter, there was never a clergyman south of New York City. All questions of his faith while he was alive were concentrated in New England, and that arose because of this political campaign. When he ran for president, the Federalists up in New England kind of used religion up there to kind of attack Jefferson. But in Virginia, there was really in his lifetime no question that he was a believer. It was only after his death there began to be different comments and criticisms. And of course, some of his letters from late in life that questioned the Trinity came out, and people began to use that to question, but not in his lifetime. Never did they ever question that.
Well, I want to tell our viewers and listeners, it's called Doubting Thomas, The Religious Life and Legacy of Thomas Jefferson. There's a picture of it there on the screen. I would encourage you, if you're a history buff of any type, and especially if you go to Washington, D.C. and you check out some of the great monuments and memorials, the Jefferson one is just an absolute must. You need to get a copy of this book. And by the way, even though this is Christmas Eve, it would make a great Christmas gift. You may want to check it out at Barnes & Noble, Amazon. Mark, I've been to the memorial on several occasions, and one of the most memorable ones for me is I went there late at night. Of course, they keep it lit at night, and I was standing in there alone. I'll just never forget it, and I'm reading these great speeches that are on the wall there, and my heart, I'm thinking, you can't help but hear and sense the Christian conviction in those speeches. You just can't help but see it.
That's right. Wonderful. At least we have that still there as a testimony of his belief in God. Talking about the God who gave us life, gave us liberty, and his fear that if we ever lose that foundation of the understanding of God as the foundation of rights, then we're in trouble as a nation.
Yeah,
that's really what he believed.
I can't quote it now, but what's the one around the rotunda, the base of the rotunda, about tyranny?
I don't know either.
It was something like eternal judgment against those over the hearts of the men of tyranny and something like that.
Yes, uh-huh.
I mean, he's basically saying to those who are tyrannical, may God come down on you and get you.
Yeah. Eternal hostility against every tyranny over the mind of man.
There you go. You got it. Yeah. Well, thanks for your work. Let's stay in touch. What's next? What are you doing next about him?
Well, I'm still doing some more publishing. One of the things that I did also this same year that I put out this book, Doubting Thomas, was another book called The Selected Religious Letters and Papers of Jefferson, which brings about, I published in there well over 50 letters by Jefferson, documents by Jefferson that have never been printed ever before. It's hard to believe maybe for many people to understand, but the official papers of Jefferson published by Princeton University have yet to publish all of his papers from about 16 years of his life. So what I did was went back and got a lot of those out for the first time in print, at least 50 letters about religion. And I'm trying to get more of that out, trying to let people see the broader context of there's so much more out there. It's not a clear cut, this is Jefferson, the deist. There's a whole lot more nuance and information. And so I hope to get that out. I'm trying to do even now a very in-depth chronology that will help people to see the context of his life in light of these documents. But
that's wonderful.
So I'm going to do this.
Well, thank you, Mark, for your work, and thanks for recapturing the truth about it. By the way, they have a website, doubtingthomasbook.com, doubtingthomasbook.com, where you can correspond with Mark. Thanks, my friend. Keep up the good work. We'll have you back soon.
Well, thank you, Perry.
And Merry Christmas to you. Okay. We'll be right back.